Oh, no, I got a good one. That's good.
All right, we have 2 attendees. Neither is our members of our group. Welcome, everyone. I would like to inform everyone that the Steamship Authority is making an audio and video recording of today's meeting. Is there anyone else making a recording of today's meeting? If so, please identify yourself by pressing the raise your hand icon, or if you are joining by phone, pressing *9 on your keypad. And when you're recognized, please state your name for the record. No one has. In response to Governor Baker's executive orders concerning the necessity to conduct public meetings in line with social distancing guidelines during the current state of emergency involving the COVID-19 pandemic, all task force members are participating remotely in today's meeting because their physical attendances today would be unreasonably difficult. All task force members are participating in the meeting by the Zoom video conferencing app, and all members will be clearly audible to each other. I'd like to welcome everyone. If you remember at our last meeting, everyone had agreed that we would invite Ed Anthus Washburn to participate in our next meeting, which is today's meeting. He was the executive director of the New Bedford Port Authority, but shortly after our last meeting, he resigned effective February 1st. And we had asked his successor at the New Bedford Port Authority, George Krikorian, to participate today, but he was not able to attend the meeting. By chance, we learned of a proposal from the Falmouth Transportation Management Committee for the authority to, in partnership with the port communities and MassDOT, to develop an appropriate grant applications for funding to carry out an investigation of freight options and improvements to provide a reliable and adequate system to move freight between Martha's Vineyard and the mainland. This seemed to be right up the alley of this task force, and we invited the chair of the Falmouth Transportation Management Committee, Ed DeWitt, to participate in today's meeting, and he graciously accepted. And Ed is with us here today. Ed, I don't know whether you need an introduction of any of our task force members. I think you may be following these meetings as well as part of your work on your committee.
I think I have a sense of who everyone is. And John, you're going to have to go through a little bit of the same thing that I did at the previous committee's meeting.
I wanted to mention that key MVY waiver documents we sent to
You guys getting that feedback?
first for their
Yes.
That was another meeting.
Yeah.
Ed, I'll just be that more up to speed.
Okay.
Right. For those of you who do not know Ed, I hope you don't mind if I give you some of your background, Ed. Ed was in the Coast Guard. He was a helicopter pilot for the Coast Guard. He is an attorney. At least I still think he's an attorney. We've lost touch over the years. And he was a board member of the Steamship Authority in 2000 and 2001. He was the manager, I think, for the New Bedford Airport for a while. And he was, at least at some time ago, the executive director for the Association to Preserve Cape Cod. He also has been the associate town council, I believe, for the town of Falmouth. And he was appointed as chair, or elected probably by the other committee members, as chair of the Falmouth Transportation Management Committee, which started meeting last year. So he knows a lot about transportation, maritime, and issues around the Cape and the islands. So Ed, I'm going to turn this over to you, and all the best.
Well, thanks. So thank you for inviting the Transportation Management Committee. As Steve mentioned, I'm the chair. I'd like to just begin with 3 premises or questions that I hope we can have a discussion about to sort of give you a sense of how the committee sort of put its report and recommendations together. And the first one is, can the authority move more freight with fewer trips? And I think that's an important question to ask. If you think about the authority's freight operations as a transportation system, instead of just boats and boat trips, you see a system ideally designed for 1921 and not 2021? And thirdly, does the authority currently incentivize waste and inefficiency because that is the easiest way to operate? Is the motto of the authority. We have always done it that way and we're good at it. And I think the committee has no dispute that you are good at what you do now. Our concern was, are you doing it as well as it possibly could be? Let me begin by telling you a little bit about our committee. We were reconvened by the Falmouth Select Board in 2020 to investigate, evaluate, and update town transportation policy and practices to essentially advise the Select Board on all things transportation. To a large extent, the committee is complaint driven. We've been responding to a number of issues that center around complaints of citizens of Falmouth related to transportation. The committee is made up of members from various boards, the Planning, Disabilities, Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, as well as at-large members. And we're fortunate to have members with transportation backgrounds and training. I'm sorry.
Oh boy. Are you back at your place or are you?
Don't,
Oh, nice.
I thought we have
Coming down this
interference, I
way.
guess.
Some other audio bleeding in from somewhere.
Okay.
It might be, hey, Doug Cedarholm,
Yeah.
John Cahill.
I-
Could it be coming from you?
It's possible. Let me, hold on. Does that help?
Your square lights up when it happens.
Station.
If everybody mutes themselves, it's a non-issue.
Quality of work is so impressive.
It's still there.
All right. Well,
I don't think it's mine. Hold
I'll
on.
just speak. I thought someone had a question at that point, so I stopped. In our investigation of authority freight operations, we were responding to the 3 S's of complaints, which were speed, sound, and smell of trucks, primarily in the Woods Hole Road corridor. As we investigated, we found other issues as well as Watson's Corner, which is that 90-degree intersection that runs between North Main Street and Locust Street, where trucks, especially large trucks, cannot make it around the corner without swinging out into the opposing lane. And through truck traffic beyond Woods Hole Road going down Main Street in Falmouth, which is signed no through trucks, and pavement management related issues. The committee looked at the system and saw a host of issues: 2-lane road dependency, the distance from the interstate highway, the number of empty trucks that are transported, the number of partially loaded trucks that are transported, limited 2-way movement of freight. I think the principal product leaving the island is trash. Exclusive reliance on roll-on, roll-off technology, zero use of containerization, lack of warehousing and freight forwarding capability, the current tariff system, and the lack of trucks enforcement related to the 3 S's that I pointed out. So our committee came up with the idea that we can move more freight with fewer trips because of how space is allocated, how space is used, and with emerging technologies in transportation, particularly small containerized marine stackable containers that can be loaded, and you don't need tractors to go with each container. And particularly containers that might be compatible with a Ford F-150 type of truck for delivery on the other end. We also noted that in 1921, most of the freight arrived via rail and was directly railed to the docks, whether it would be in New Bedford or in Woods Hole. Rail links ran directly to the harbors in 1921. And 2-lane roads were the norm in 1921. multi-lane highways really did not come into existence until the 1930s. And various other types of things, smaller trucks and those kinds of issues. So that's how we came up with the conclusion that the current system is a 1921 system as opposed to a 2021 system. And we do think that there are, because of I talked to a UPS tractor trailer driver and I said, how often are you full? And he said, very rarely. And the incentives aren't there to optimize loading of trucks. And there are some management kinds of things that can be done for that. So our committee sort of said, well, what can we do about this? We don't really sort of have the expertise to sort of say what's the best way to do this. We think a hybrid system of moving bulk, roll on, roll off, and containerized cargo might be an option of trying to do that, particularly if you could tie it to a freight forwarding facility and on the pier facility where cargo can be sorted and prepared for shipping on vessels. You would ultimately end up with freight moving on full vessels and vessels loaded to capacity and stacked in smaller space, and it can work out. But we don't know how practical this is and what all of the other types of things. So we investigated, well, how would you go about determining what is the best way to move freight from the mainland to the islands? And we engaged in a number of conversations with state and federal maritime officials to sort of see what they would suggest. And we learned about a number of funding opportunities. The federal government in particular is interested in moving freight from the interstate highway system to the maritime highway system directly with direct links. Obviously, we can't do that going through Woods Hole because the interstate highways don't conveniently serve Woods Hole. They do serve New Bedford. Both 495 and 195 are convenient to New Bedford. So we came up with the idea of recommending that the Steamship Authority, joining with local communities, local ports, MassDOT, and whatever, apply for a grant to look at what would be the way to move freight with a 2021 design as opposed to a 1921 design. I believe Steve has given you a copy of the report. So I've just tried to sort of give you the highlights, how we got there in a nutshell. And this is our idea. We're not suggesting this is what you should do. We are suggesting that this is something important to sort of look at and examine. And clearly, if you can reduce the number of ships that are traveling between the islands and carry more freight, there's savings there, there's efficiencies there, there's more reliable freight to the islands, and I think it benefits everybody all around. So that's how we got to where we're at, and I'd be happy to open it up to questions or discussions, share with you some of the things that we found or didn't find.
Does anyone have any questions for Ed?
Well, I have one observation. I think a way to go forward would be to go back to having rail service to Woods Hole. I mean, I brought that up at our first meeting. I think that it's unfortunate that that rail system was taken away, because that is a very efficient way to move material. And I'm not saying that I advocate that now, but it's kind of ironic that you say, you know, we're in a 1921 system when in some ways that system was better by having the rail connection there in Woods Hole.
Well, you do have rail to New Bedford, and you have freight rail into New Bedford that exists. It would, even if you would return rail, which I think is dubious because of the status of the Shining Sea Bikeway, you would, I mean, just look at the length of time to bring South Coast Rail to the South Coast and to extend the Middleborough line to Buzzards Bay. So those are really, really long time types of issues. And the other consequence is that rail transported freight is different than it was in 1921. Virtually everything went by rail in 1921. That is no longer the case. And a lot more freight is being moved by truck at this time. So the transportation system has shifted quite a bit as well.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Well, we think this is a no-lose, no-brainer type of situation that the authority should think about. I mean, even if you're getting a grant to do the study, you know, implementing whatever the recommendations are still comes back to the authority to figure that out. And I think that there are things certainly beyond the capability of our committee that might be identified where you can largely improve the inefficiencies that exist in the system. I think it's hard to argue that there are inefficiencies in the system right now. It's just the nature of the beast that you're dealing with. And when you're loading a Kenworth tractor with a trailer, you're wasting 20 feet of space on every vessel that you pull that Kenworth tractor with the trailer over onto the island.
Oh, let me
Leon,
just ask another question following that up. If you don't have the trailer, when you get to the other side, we don't have the parking space either at Oak Bluffs or Vineyard Haven to deal with the picking up of the box coming off the vehicle, I mean, off the boat. And one thing that we have looked at, Ed, was the possibility of compacting our trash and baling it and then storing it and then putting that on a barge and taking that down to New Bedford or wherever. So we could move more compacted trash that way. But there is an issue with that too. I found I actually have a copy of the report committee that I got from the Edgartown Transfer Station. This study was done by Vineyard Haven and Oak Bluffs, I think about 5 or 6 years ago. And that's when Ralph spoke to us about the $600,000 cost of the compactor. That was the cost in that particular proposal. But one of the things that just came up, and I was unaware of it, when you start compacting trash, you end up creating a slurry or a sludge that comes out of gets squeezed out, and you need to then have to do something with that juice that's been produced. So although it sounded good initially to do that. Now, the one thing I did find out too is that we being a rural community, the island, we do qualify for some major grants that could look at that as a way to help mitigate the amount of need for trucks to take the trash off the island.
And basically that's what we're suggesting that you do, is to think about what you have right now. If you were going to start from new, there was nothing going on, what would it look like? What would be the most efficient way of doing this? And I think this is what we're suggesting that you do. I think that there are some technologies, including, you know, some hybrid models of moving maritime freight, where you might not even need to, you might be able to mix bulk cargo, roll on, roll off, and some containerized, and sort of optimize that. You probably would need some pure types of infrastructure that does not exist to carry it out. But in the long run, that might actually be advantageous to the island and its ability to have a reserve of the goods and services that it really needs that come over in the freight system. And that's, I think that's really one of the important things that we're asking you to do, is to look at this all as a system and not simply as a ferry boat that you put trucks on. Because the system has impacts in Falmouth, it has impacts in Bourne, the bridges. The system has impacts within, you know, Tisbury, Oak Bluffs, Edgartown, West Tisbury. And we need to be sort of thinking about that. I think one of the disappointing things at the last meeting that I did attend, which was the Sound and the Noise and Traffic Committee. What's the title of that?
Woods Hole Falmouth Noise and Traffic Mitigation Working Group.
Okay, that, you know, that working group was a statement from a staff member of the Steamship Authority when the selectman from Falmouth asked for a letter to ask the state police to do some enforcement on Woods Hole Road, and the response was, "Well, that's not our problem." And I only sort
I
of
have to correct you a little bit, Ed, because I was there as well.
Okay.
I think he was asking that the state police actually do these weight checks at the Woods Hole terminal, and we did not have sufficient room there.
I think that the question then went on for a letter about having them come and do it, and the answer was, but it was getting outside the fact of, it impressed me as not being systematic thinking. It was looking at the loading dock only and not looking at how things get there, how things leave there, and where they're going. And I think the more that we think about it as a system, I think the more savings can be made, the more efficiencies can be added, and the better the product for everyone, and the less impact, I think, on some of the communities that are along the way of the current system.
Ed, if your proposal is that the Steamship Authority seek grants to have this investigation, to have this study, would the grants be coming from MARAD, the Maritime Administration, or from
Well, that was certainly one of the sources that we found. I think there's other grants. As you all probably know, there's a current grant done by MassDOT with the Urban Harbors Institute that actually is looking at the greenhouse gas emissions associated with freight to the Steamship Authority. And I don't know what the source of that funding is, but I think this is actually something that can piggyback on that. And the information that comes out of that study, I think, can be used to actually support the idea of getting additional grants from different sources.
John, please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Ed, now I've heard it twice, so I got to play a little bit of devil's advocate.
Sure.
You know, when I listen to it, I have two concerns. One is just the capital investment that would have to be involved would be significant, but secondarily, and as important, you keep mentioning the word savings, and I don't see where the savings would be. What you're talking about on the steamship side?
Well, if you had to reduce the number of trips that you make, you save money. And that's, if you carried freight more efficiently than what you're doing now, you could actually reduce the number of trips that you're carrying out now. And I think that's your biggest expense.
But I also see if we do that roll on, roll off, which I understand the concept of it, but if we go forward with that, let's say in the future, whole new world, there's a significant labor cost associated on both ends, whether it be on the mainland or the island.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why you do the study, is to sort of identify where those costs are. Certainly, when FedEx started out, the argument was flying a letter from New York to Seattle so that it gets there is crazy. How can you make money doing that? And what FedEx did was it really revolutionized cost savings in moving freight. And I think that some of those technologies have so advanced and those opportunities are there that it looked like that was a stupid idea at the beginning. And by sort of doing it, they saved, a lot of money. And, no one has second thoughts about FedEx right now or its longevity.
I don't know how the numbers play out on when you're talking about millions of people versus, 20,000 people here on Martha's Vineyard. I don't know if that can be equated the same, but I understand what you're saying.
But right now you're moving a lot of air. That's what you're doing. Either the fact of inefficient, trucks themselves have a lot of air underneath the trucks, above the trucks. If you could put cargo on stackable, small size containers, you're not moving air except coming back, but then you're stacking the air differently and you're doing that even more efficiently.
And so
And you might
stacking would
even
be
be able to
done.
move trash in those containers. There's always been the argument that you can't use the containers for those kinds of things, but on ocean-going vessels, they have used hazardous material going in one direction and consumer goods in the other direction. There's a cost in that. I don't know the answer in terms of what's the best way to do this, but I think it really is a good idea to start thinking about this, because the sooner you start thinking about it, the sooner that you can implement this. And
Yeah,
this is
I
not
agree with
going to
that, Todd.
happen in a year or two. This is a long-range capital investment program. And there may be federal funds, particularly from this idea of linking the interstate highway to the maritime highway. There may be funds for some of the capital expenses at both sides that you need. I don't know that at this point. I think, and it may depend on what administration is in power at the time. Clearly, if in the next 4 years or 3.5 years, reduction of greenhouse gases is going to be an important consideration for this administration. And if you can tackle into that reduction in greenhouse gases, and that's why I mentioned the Urban Harbors study, because that's what it's actually focused on, and that's bullets for sort of moving this forward.
I like the concept, but I just want to keep exploring something. When you say stackable containers, are you talking about stackable containers in Woods Hole or just in New Bedford or some other port?
So, when you go to the airport and you see the luggage compartments get loaded on the airplane that slide up,
Oh, yeah.
those types of containers can be used to go on the back of a pickup truck, so that you would stack 3 of those on top of each other on the boat over, and then they would be offloaded onto a truck body for delivery on the islands. That's the model that I've seen. I'm not sure that's the best model, but that's a different way of doing it, where you're much better utilizing space. And you also can make deliveries more efficient, because you could target cargo to be delivered in Menemsha. You could, one to be delivered in Gayhead, and 2 or 3 that are going to Edgartown or whatever. But you could better divide those. Sorry about that. Kinds of things. So you get different options in terms of how you do that. And also, not all freight has to go immediately. So by having a freight forwarding facility, you can hold and load up freight. Now, some of this is already done by Cape Cod Express in terms of how they, you know, put things together to go over the island. But I think there's even, you know, more efficiencies that can be built into that as you go forward.
But I just want to ask again, are you talking about doing those services out of Woods Hole?
I'm not, my sense is that Woods Hole would not be the ideal location to do a system like this because of looking at the 2-lane road connection. I think the most logical place is probably a place like New Bedford or Fall River, which are on the interstate highway system. And I think that's where you're going to get that bang for the buck from the federal government to not only put in for the study money, but for the capital investment money.
All right, one last question, then I'll be quiet. The last presentation, you brought it up today, was something I've never heard before, and I just wanted to ask yourself and others, whether it's Doug Brown or anyone else from Falmouth, was one of the 3 S's was smell.
Yes.
I've not heard an issue of smell in the
Primarily
meeting.
from the trash trucks. But there have been some other complaints of smell that we uncovered.
I don't know if it's true, but is it true? Do you know, is the waste treatment plant at capacity now and the effluent is now being trucked off? Because people have been getting reports that there's been a lot more sewage coming off lately.
I don't know.
And somebody was guessing that maybe the plant's at capacity over there.
The plant is not at capacity. What they've done is Edgartown is no longer accepting sewage from other towns. Therefore, if you like me and live in West Tisbury, you want your septic pumped, it is pumped and then it's stored here in a separate facility, and then it's shipped off island to be treated.
Okay.
It's not taking it. Is that right, Jim? I think that's the way they're doing it.
I think so, but I'm not positive either, but I know that
We can find out.
Yeah.
We can find out for you.
I think that's another increase that is coming along.
I do know that there have been odor complaints, and like we just tried to look at what complaints were coming into the town and those ones. So that's why I just put it in the 3 S's.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
I was just gonna say that I've not seen the smell on the vehicles because the way the stainless steel trucks that are taking it off are pretty covered over and there's nothing leaking out of them. So I'm not sure where the smell would be coming from, Ed.
I couldn't tell you. All of those are obviously complaints. They're anecdotal. They're
I mean, years ago, the old trucks that leaked, there was always, even on the boat, you could smell them. Now you don't. I mean, it's
and it may be other things, and it may be some kind of things. I think that if a truck is making noise and it's dripping something, that someone's going to complain about noise, speed, and smell. And but I can tell you that there are a lot of complaints about truck traffic on Woods Hole Road.
Well, I mean, let me ask this question. You said you talked to somebody with UPS or FedEx about the truck being not full. And they have a commitment to their senders to deliver stuff within a certain time frame. So that we've actually doubled the amount of UPS stuff that's happening on the island now from where it was before because of just that growth. And the same is happening with FedEx. So those trucks are coming because they're on a time schedule. So you wouldn't be able.
See, here's the issue. Could they use a smaller truck and carry the same thing, and would that free up more space on the boat?
The trailer trucks are equipped with a rack machine inside to put the stuff directly into they pull up right into the backup.
I understand, and that's when I got in, talking to him. He said it's basically one size fits all, and I'm just sort of saying that the incentives are one size fits all is a good way for UPS to do it, and it makes sense for them, but it may not make sense where you have a limited resource and of space on a boat. There may be better ways to allocate that space in terms of how the incentives are, for that. One of the things that happened when I was on the Steamship Authority Board was when we shifted from charging by weight to charging by length, because that was an idea of inefficiencies. But ultimately, and this is one of the things that I found very interesting, the cost of goods on the island is minimally impacted by transportation. It's much more impacted by seasonality and real estate and rent and those kinds of things in terms of, of the goods. So, putting that extra length on, is the cost of doing business. And, maybe it shouldn't be, maybe there needs to be some balance between weight and length, or some penalty for emptiness. I think it's something that probably should be considered, because there is extra space that could be used. And ultimately, as I said, that first question was, can you carry more freight with fewer trips? And I think that there is capacity within the system to do that.
Interestingly,
Ways of creating even more capacity.
I mean, Bob or Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but for the trucks, even UPS, we do allow our freight customers to change their reservations up until sometime the day before the reservations are made, even though they make these reservations months and months in advance. And so if UPS were going to come down with a partially filled truck, they would have the option of changing their reservation to a shorter truck and saving money. And I think we thought that would be the best incentive for them to take shorter trucks when they don't have as much freight as they had anticipated.
And it's one driver that I had 5 minutes with. They don't do that.
Well, that would be UPS's decision, but we've made that available to them.
No, and I think that's a sound way of doing it, but I think that there has to be some, there should be some incentive there should be an incentive to actually change the trucks.
Oh, they save money if they do. We thought that would be a good incentive for the customer to save money.
We do have shippers that have, that will downsize when it's appropriate.
I think you can, if you can figure out a reward system for that, I think that would be really, really good.
Ed, we do, because they're paying a lower rate if they can downsize, but you also have to look at the shippers, what boxes or vehicles do they have in their fleet, and how far in advance are their shipments that are going to the endpoint changing.
But companies like UPS spread that cost. They're not really, the guy who's making the decision which truck to say doesn't see any benefit to that cost savings.
No, I 100% agree with you, but then some of the smaller shippers do.
Yeah. And I think probably the local people are much better at that than some of the long haul people and some of the other types of people. But I do think that there is room for improving the efficiencies there and reducing the need for more trips.
So Ed, if I may,
Go ahead, Bob. Oh, go ahead. Mine's a different idea, so go ahead.
When we switched from the weight basis to the length, it's because, in part because the commodity that we have available is the available space on the freight deck. The weight is a factor in terms of loading the vessels, but a combination of the two, you'd have to be looking at it, because what if the truck is carrying a full load of insulation, which doesn't weigh a lot? So it is. That would have to be looked at.
I do think that that was the right move to make in terms of. I'm not saying that it wasn't. I'm just saying that it did create some I don't want to call them unintended consequences, but there are some other issues associated with that. And, you know, how things are incentivized or not incentivized, I think is important to look at and to see what kinds of, you know, if you can get an extra truck on every freight boat or every boat that's carrying freight, you know, that's a good thing for, you know, for everyone all around. And I think that's ultimately what we're talking about, is trying to maximize the existing space so that you don't have to add. You know, one of the things that was reported was that you're considering 24-hour freight operations. Well, I don't think that you're going to need to go to 24-hour freight operations if you really look at trying to design a system for the era and everything that we know about how best to move freight.
And just so you know, that was one statement that I possibly made during a much longer presentation that has been misconstrued. What I was trying to get across was that one of the principal purposes for having formed this task force is to consider all the options on a long-term basis to try to work out stuff that satisfies all the communities. I think my statement was taken at best out of context and at worst misconstrued.
But even if it, you know, I don't know whether it is or it isn't,
But it
think that
isn't.
there are other ways to sort of look at this problem and not try and fix it incrementally, but take a sort of system look at it. And I think in all of the years that I've had any association with the Steamship Authority, things have been done incrementally. And you know, that's not necessarily a criticism. I think that's a reality of the nature of the business and whatever. And we're just saying, I think now is a great time to look at this as a freight system of how best to move freight to the islands. And that's our committee's recommendation. We made it to the select board and had hoped that they would pass it along, and it hasn't been passed along except informally, you know, largely because you asked for it. And so
that's why we're here.
Yes.
But if I could ask a question, the idea of looking at our freight operations on a holistic approach to say, what can we do to improve our freight operations? Let's get an expert in, because we aren't experts in this. None of us on this Zoom call has all the answers, and everyone can disagree. But when you say that the grant money is tied to the federal government's interest in the national highway system, tying to the marine highway system, and it would seem to, I think, certainly island residents, that there might be a bias in such a study to try to get an answer that says going to New Bedford is the best approach. And there would be a concern that the legitimate interest of the islanders in their transportation system having to be more efficient may not be given as much consideration as they think it should be. If that's where the source of the grant money, and whether it can be just a study just looking at the system, not only with a New Bedford option as an option, but also looking at the Woods Hole operations, even though you don't think Woods Hole is conducive to that, just starting from scratch, an expert would have that as an option to consider as well. I mean, how can the islanders be assured that such a study would be considered fair, and also the mainland residents also consider such a study to be fair?
Well, I think any study you can sort of argue that there's somehow some bias built into it, but that's only one. The interstate to maritime highway is only one bucket of federal money that appears to be out there. There are others. Secondarily, I think that if you write the grant proposal without And that's why I think it should come from the Steamship Authority. With what you really want to do, then they're going to make the decision of award based on what it is that you want to do. I can't come up with any idea where a 2021 plan relies on 9 miles of 2-lane road through residential areas as the most efficient way of moving freight. That's how I sort of see it. That's my personal bias in terms of that. But, you know, someone else may come up with an, you know, another option or idea in terms of how to do it. You know, someone may identify, you know, the Brooklyn Navy Yard as the staging place to move freight to the islands for some reason. I have no idea what, you know, what might happen. So I think it's really, a lot of it is you would be in the driver's seat in terms of saying what it is that you want to study and how you want to study it and why you want to study it. And clearly, I think the handwriting's on the wall that if MassDOT, and I understand that MassDOT went ahead with this without consulting with the Steamship Authority about the greenhouse gas study. Is that correct? That they gave the grant to Urban Harbors before you were involved in that?
Yeah, they did not approach us.
Yeah. So you know, this idea of greenhouse gas reductions is something that I think is going to be very important in terms of how we're sort of operating our systems. And it's something, you know, to keep in mind.
John?
I have a comment if I could. So I hope that any study that's done would consider all options, including if there's a more efficient way to run out of Woods Hole, it should be considered. But also, I think that would be more of a short-term thing. What I'm really hoping is that we can come up with a best sort of an idea to separate some of the freight, some that's not as time sensitive. Of course, your vegetables and restaurant supplies is going to be time sensitive, and that'll probably continue to truck through Woods Hole. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to have to be that way. But if we can start to weed out some of the stuff that's not as time sensitive, that could be staged in New Bedford, that could come on bigger, slower boats. If I don't know what it would be, but let that idea come forward. Let the cost be analyzed. If we feel like it's going to cost more, maybe it will. Then I want to report that I had attended a meeting with Congressman Bill Keating and Senator Susan Moran last week. And this was one of the subjects that we touched on, was the fact that we need some government assistance with implementation of planning, implementation of railway connections to places like Mr. Packer's Yard and that waterfront in New Bedford. And we need some options there that provide for the ability to even consider it. Because right now, if we do a study, they're going to say, well, if there was a place in New Bedford, maybe we could do something. But being that this is a long-range planning committee, which is great because it's going to take a couple of years to get anything in place if we ever achieve anything. But I think we should keep that door open to that possibility of some of the freight going through New Bedford, even though it may cost more. And I said to Mr. Keating, we're going to have to consider some kind of subsidy. You know, you've got transportation all over the country is subsidized. Why does the Steamship Authority have to pay its own way forever? And why, when they're boxed into these small facilities, you know, what's our option in the future? Because right now, as you know, the Nantucket run out of Barnstable is constricted. Falmouth's going to get constricted. No matter how effectively you try to load these trucks, there's going to be a point where you reach a limit, because it seems to me there's a lot more potential for growth on the Vineyard, but not that much potential for growth out of Woods Hole. So at some point, we're going to reach a tipping point. It's good that we'll probably be prepared because we're doing this work now. And I said to Mr. Keating, we're not going to be able to put it on the tickets of the people traveling from the Vineyard. They're already overpaying. You're probably paying more than double what the average subsidized ferry in Seattle is paying, and that's government subsidized. So why shouldn't this run be subsidized as well? So I think if we do a study and we come to the conclusion it's going to cost more, we also have to do a study of how much is the vineyard folks paying compared to what everybody else is paying, and why is our government not contributing to this transportation initiative the way they do with the MBTA for billions of dollars, Seattle Steamship Authority, and countless others. And that should be another separate study of why do we have to pay the most? Or you guys, actually, I don't have to pay it.
Thank you, Doug. Ed, if I could ask, are there firms, how would we identify a firm in order to conduct such a study?
Well, I think you'd have to do it by RFP, but I think, it may be outside the scope of the Urban Harbors Institute, but I think looking at something like the Urban Harbors Institute, which is a university-sponsored sort of think tank on urban harbors to carry it out, and they have a multitude of transportation engineers, they have logistics people on staff and whatever. But I do think that there are those kinds of transportation think tanks that are out there that would be very capable of doing this. I think it would be better to go with something like that instead of someone who's ultimately trying to sell you a service or something like that, or a standard sort of consultant type of thing. But those types of groups exist. I think MARAD would probably be a great resource to talk to, who's done really good studies on similar things in the past in terms of that.
And are there annual deadlines for grant applications? Are they?
Yeah, it depends on which it is. Some of them are open all of the time. Some of them have specific requests and whatever. When we had sent this in September, there was a deadline coming up, I think in December, for one of the different programs. And I haven't followed since then about that. So I apologize for the delay of getting this over to you. But I think it would be ongoing. I think as politics has changed, I think you're in a more favorable probably climate than you were a year ago anyway, just because of some of the environmental impacts and climate related impacts of reducing trips would make. And I think that's ultimately what one of the real important selling points of adding to the efficiency of the program is your environmental footprint is going to be reduced.
Doug Cedarholm.
I have a hard time believing that even if we implemented a more efficient freight operation, that there would be any fewer trips. You may open up room on boats, but that's going to get filled up by cars. And I, for one, am not particularly interested in more cars on Martha's Vineyard.
Well, that's another management issue though that you can deal with, and that other islands have dealt with those kinds of management things in restricting the number of vehicles, either by, why are you bringing a vehicle over to the island, sort of thing. I think that's part of looking at this as a system in terms of that. And I think that's an important sort of constraint.
Ed, if they did something like that, it'd be against the law. You can't legislate who can bring a car to the island, because once you do that, you're making a choice, whether it's going to be a rich person, a white person, or a black person. There's no subjective way to be able to determine who you're going to bring to the island, but by limiting cars and saying people can't come.
If you have limited capacity and you have a rational basis.
There is no rational basis.
Sure there is.
Name it.
Well, you allow residents to travel, and then you allow first come, first serve the rest of those reservations.
That's going off the island and coming back.
Well,
But if
it's
the
going
problem,
both ways.
but the problem you have there, Ed, is economically, some of the island residents can't afford to buy a ticket as a person with means can. So you're penalizing a person on the island who doesn't have the means to buy their reservation earlier in time.
Well, I'm
So
not
you-
saying I'm saying don't penalize the residents of the island, is to allow them, to go, to have the advantage, and that what's ever left over is for non-residents on a first come, first served basis. Or
It's still,
some other basis.
under a public accommodation law, if you read the law, Ed, the law says you can't make distinguish even between residents and non-residents if it's a public accommodation. That's Massachusetts state law.
I think you could come up with a system that could reduce the number of cars that are allowed on the island. And I think you could come up with a number of really good reasons why you want to do that. But that's something that I think that you probably should take a serious look at if that's what your concern is.
Maybe you have a resident sticker that, cap the cost of that. And then however many non-resident stickers you have would be much more expensive. And maybe it would only be, a luxury to bring a car over there. Maybe regular tourists would have to, rely on the bus or cabs or bicycles or something.
You know what a cab costs on the island?
No, I don't, but
It's $20 per person from Vineyard Haven to where I live in West Tisbury. That's, if a family of 4, that's $80. And every time they want to go someplace, they're gonna spend another $80 going and coming. So it's not even practical to not have a car over here if you're a visitor.
Still a conversation though that we have had in the past, and I think it's worth us continuing to have, because there's going to become a point where it's simply not possible to put more cars on the island, which we know because we have a report that we all read before we started this committee that said, we need to take a serious look at that.
And I think there are legal ways that you can do that. I think you may get challenges to that, but I think if you take your time and you artfully do it and it's non-discriminatory in terms of, meeting the needs of the citizens of the island, I think it would be defensible.
I would guess that any real comprehensive study of the system would conclude that we need to provide non-motorized vehicle ways to get to Woods Hole and public transportation on the islands as the problem. To me, that's the only realistic way to disincentivize cars, if you give people a real way to get here other than in a car. I think that's what would be the outcome.
Or we could charge what they charge to take a car to Nantucket. That would help. It's a bit more, I believe. Yeah, it's very tough.
But these are all tough questions. That's why we're having these meetings.
And the really tough part is you don't want to kick out all the tourists because you don't make any money. So.
Well, that's a real problem for the people who own 60% of the housing stock here, because they don't live here.
Right.
And one of the other things that I would hope the study would look at is that we can't grow any more land around the ports. And we have limited space for both parking and staging, both at Oak Bluffs and in Tisbury. So the only long-term thing could be we'd have to add another port. Now, the one nearest to us, which Packer owns, is being tied up for the next 5 years with the Cape Wind project. And we're looking at that down the road. But again, a lot of what you're suggesting, even the staging of the vehicles or staging of the containers, we don't have a place to stage it. I mean, Carroll stages his stuff almost a half a mile away to put his trucks on the boat. So he doesn't have to be down there. They come down and go right on the boat from his operation.
And the Packer facility is not being tied up for just the next 5 years. Cape Wind wants to create it so that they can service the turbines indefinitely.
Okay,
That's really what's driving that.
But
Yep.
Mr. Packard said that that's on the other slip on the other side of his property, which he's already set up for them. And he plans to continue his freight operation.
Oh, he absolutely, it's quite clear he wants to expand his freight operation.
Right,
That's why he's asking for 2 new ramps.
right. So he's not
He
going
hasn't
away.
justified it, but he's asked for it.
Right. And so personally, I think that a lot of the answer to the reducing of freight would be coming through from Mr. Packer or other private haulers. I don't think it's something that Steamship Authority has to build an infrastructure for. I think as long as we can make it a possibility. And I think that the study should take that into consideration, how much revenue Steamship Authority would lose if they were to consider these options of allowing private haulers to take some of the load. And that's, again, where the subsidy has to come in. I really believe in my heart that that's going to have to come into play to offset the losses and make the Steamship Authority viable with this lost revenue. That's my personal feeling, unless I find out otherwise so far.
Well, the problem with subsidies is that they become very political and they become, susceptible to forces that aren't necessarily intended to create the best result. So I mean, the Steamship Authority is very unique, and they've done an admirable job given the fact that they don't get money from anybody.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that I think you guys do pay the highest ticket price, and also you're running out of space. So
We are definitely running out of space, and any infrastructure changes on our side of the water are very challenging. I mean, truly, other than Packard, there are no options. Zero.
Right.
I think Leon would agree with that.
but if we had an efficient and effective method for Mr. Packer to move more stuff, he could run more boats. As he said, he only runs a couple now, 2, maybe 3 a week. And he said he could do more if he wanted to, if he had the stuff to move.
And the number one piece to do with that would be to do the compacting of the refuse that's in the transfer station. That has an initial outlay of about $600,000 for the machine, not counting the other essentials. So you're probably talking about $1 million just to set that up.
I wonder
Well,
what
maybe
the
there's-
slurry treatment costs.
Maybe there's another federal
Sorry.
grant somewhere.
I can't hear Doug Cedarholm. Go ahead, Doug.
I was just saying, I wonder what the treatment of the slurry would cost.
I don't know the answer to that. We
No.
probably have to tank it and drive it off or put it somewhere else.
I have to weigh in on the trash issue because the movement on the island is to try to reduce trash going off to zero by composting and recycling stuff. That's where it's going. We're not going to be buying a trash compactor. We're going to be putting in a recycling and composting facility. I'm almost positive. I think it's in the works already. So I think that's where thinking that there's going to be a lot of trash to haul off, I don't really think that's going to happen.
I think Nantucket's getting ready to start hauling their stuff off because they're not able to process as much as they had hoped.
John, I saw your hand up, but you're still muted. You have to,
Yeah. Well, actually, now my question is for Doug. Did you think or about Nantucket? Because my understanding is that they've been composting for over 20 years now.
They have. I went and toured their facility last year, and they were at that time faced with coming close to the capacity for distributing the product. And the composting is not as effective or efficient as they had hoped it would be. So there's a lot of struggles. I mean, they've done a good job, but they are at the point where they're starting to realize that it's going to only matter of time before they're going to start trucking the stuff off. And again, it'll be less because it's compacted and it's in a better state than just loose trash.
Yeah.
But they're going to be doing some trucking in the near future.
I think it would be great, Jim. Your idea is a good one. And I think maybe if you and I can talk offline, I've seen some recent articles and I know some of the people on the island as well that are involved with the composting. We're literally, thousands of tons of composting could be processed locally.
You guys probably have more capacity to do the work too, because you're a bigger island.
Yeah. And I think, Jim, you're right on. The movement is in that direction.
We have a lot of local farms who would be happy to get it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
and Nantucket has been doing it for 20 years. 20 years is a good horizon to look at.
Right.
And so they haven't been bringing over solid waste that entire time.
And maybe they'll come up with a plan to distribute it to more. I don't think they have as many farms as you guys have. I think it's,
Yeah.
they're just running out of places to put the stuff. And if you go to their landfill, or what used to be their landfill, there's mounds and mounds of it all over the place and very little room to drive anymore.
Would the group be in favor of having composting as one of our topics in the future meetings?
When the refuse district came to the commission to redo their facility, part of the plan was an area for their composting facility as soon as they can get it funded. And I know they plan to get it going.
Why don't I look at that for the next meeting and see if we can get some appropriate people to come in for that.
I know
And
the
they've
lady-
already,
Thanks, Jim.
they've already started the cutting up the opening up the space to be able to redo the transfer station in Edgartown, which is part of that process, Jim. And I know that compost is going to eat up a lot of the paper and the garbage, but you're still going to have the issue now with what are we going to do with the plastic and the cans, because we can't even sell that anymore. We're paying people to take it away. So that might be a shred and bag, a bundle that, but that would be another project to look at some point.
And you might start banning that stuff and using the cornstarch. They make plates and plastic knives and plastic forks that are all made out of cornstarch now. I went to an event last year and I couldn't believe it. I volunteered as a trash guy, and the lady from Compost with Me was there, and she said, "Oh no, that I was separating out the plastic knives and forks." And she goes, "That's all cornstarch. It all goes into the compost." Pretty surprised.
Yeah, our concessionaire uses that cornstarch knives, forks, and spoons. So
See that? You guys are cutting edge. That's not 1921.
when they're open, they're not open.
So if they fall overboard, it's no big deal.
Ed,
Ed, I think you've heard a little bit that even the possibility of a study into the Steamship Authority's freight operations opens up many more inquiries about the rest of our traffic and traffic situations on the vineyard. So what I'm wondering is whether there could be such a global study, a comprehensive study that would look not only into our basic freight operations for more efficiency, but also look into what the unintended consequences may be in terms of additional car traffic potential, and whether, if the Steamship Authority were to start this process in order to decide what type of study to have, whether it would be a better idea for the Steamship Authority to partner with the Martha's Vineyard Commission, even the Cape Cod Commission. Would that increase the chances of funding? Would MARAD or these other groups say we only want to subsidize a portion of the proposal? I'm just trying to get our hands around this whole process. Because I'm with the Steamship Authority. I've never done a grant application before. As everyone here says, we've paid for our own way this entire time.
I think that you have to be careful, because if you make it too complex, I think it's going to be very difficult for the grant agency to sort of say this fits within our umbrella for funding, and you may be parsing it out. I think if you think of it in terms of elements and do it even in terms of coordinated and phased types of things, you might be better off. But I really don't have insight, so much into that in terms of my experience with grants is that the agencies have a particular sort of mandate and agenda to carry out certain kinds of things, and you match your application with what they're trying to sort of accomplish in terms of that. That's why one of the buckets we focused on was this interstate to Marine Highway connection. It seemed to be a good fit for what we were talking about in terms of looking at this particular system.
And
just
another
because-
aspect
Oh, I'm
in the
sorry.
chat, Mary Longacre has been there from the beginning with all this, and I apologize to her for leaving her hang so long. She's asked, has there been any investigation of moving freight air rather than sea? That's something that we may look at. Air freight, well, Ed may know something about that as well.
Well, the airplanes that you have flying to the island have really, really limited capacity, so that they're flying, light amounts of cargo, and generally high precious cargo, because of you can't carry the volume that a FedEx does. Although FedEx does fly freight into the island, and they used to have a Beech 18 that went over to the island. I don't know what they're flying over now, and I don't know how often that they're going.
John?
Yeah, and I did a little work on that just because I wanted to know the FedEx plane. I don't know what the model is. I apologize, but he averages 1,500 pounds a day off season, 5 days a week, and 2,500 pounds a day peak season, 6 days a week. So that's not a lot. That's presently.
And a freight truck is 86,000 pounds.
Or more.
All right, and Mary Longacre is encouraging us to talk to Rob McNeil, head of the Public Works Department on Nantucket, about how they handle trash now.
Definitely.
There's also a lady that works at the waste facility who was very knowledgeable and very helpful and explained to us how everything worked. So I don't recall her name, but I have a card of hers somewhere, but I'm sure the DPW guy can tell you. I think she would be very informative about how the machine worked and didn't work and the challenges involved, because if you're thinking about implementing it, it would be good to hear that.
And Steve, I can get you in touch with the woman who is president of the Island Grown Initiative. That is one of the people that is leading this composting. And you can set up a meeting to meet with her via Zoom. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to do so.
I wouldn't mind hearing that at our meeting here too, if you all want to do that, because
Yeah,
I'd love to see this get started with that in Falmouth as well.
yeah. I think it would be good to bring it to the meeting. I think probably a little prep work first to understand.
Right.
I agree.
So what you're saying, Steve, then have a compost meeting
Yes, maybe we can even go out and do it ourselves.
and have Nantucket, the woman that John just mentioned, who I heard her presentation, and maybe somebody from the, actually, she's working hand in hand with the transfer station. So whether or not we need but he would be good to come too, just to be on the phone and what the plans are for Edgartown. I was on the MV commission when they first came through and get ready to expand it. And my house is exactly 3/10 of a mile away from it. So I'll get to see it as it goes together. And I can vouch for those FedEx planes flying in and out, because my house is directly above the flight path. It's 100 yards out my front door is the runway.
Above or below the flight path?
Huh?
Above or below the flight path?
Okay.
It's really fun in the summer, isn't it?
Question for Steve, if I could. So would Mr. Washburn consider attending another meeting? He's still on the board of that port council, isn't he?
He is on the port council, but in terms of speaking on behalf of the city, he wanted to defer to the interim director of the harbor. It's not harbor development anymore.
Port Authority now.
Authority.
Yeah.
So.
And is that person going to come at another time, do you think?
Yeah, he had responded that because the North Terminal, which has been has been raised as a site here, that apparently they didn't receive bids, but they rejected them Board of Redevelopment, and so they're working through that process, I think, so.
They're also under a lawsuit right now from one of the other waterfront owners, kind of trying to put a stop to it because of their property rights. So
Right.
it's certainly a long-range plan.
Right, he deferred comment to the press on that, to the city, and I think that may be one reason he was unable to attend this meeting.
Okay.
All right, well, anyone has any more questions for Ed?
Ed, if I may, can I reach out to you?
I would love for you to reach out, Bob, and I'm looking forward to you meeting with us and talking about some of these things that we've talked about today.
Okay.
Okay.
Steve has all my contact info, I think.
I've been able to contact you, that's
He
good.
tracked me down anyway.
Okay,
Well, I'd like to thank you for inviting me, and particularly those who said when we apply, which I think is more than where we were when I started. So thanks very much, and thanks for what you're doing, because I think this is really something that's important, not only to the island, but the entire region. And coming up with a good plan is really important. So thank you for devoting the time and energy that you have to all of this. And I think zero waste is a great goal to have. So I applaud you on that, and good luck with your composting thing.
and before you leave, Mary Longacre has had her hand up the entire time, and she has done some chats. Unless someone thinks it's wrong, I think allowing her to talk, oh, she's gone now. So that ended that. Oh,
Okay,
she-
she may be-
Thank you.
She might be referring to my comments about the landfill filling up. She
Right.
says a lot of.
She did.
But I've taken down the name she's given us, so hopefully her work will not have been in vain. Thank you, Ed, again. We'll
Great,
talk.
thanks so much. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you, Ed.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good work.
She's given us the name of the
Yes.
Graham Durovich, maybe the person that I remember speaking with, and I
And
think
Ron
she's
McNair.
referring to my comments earlier that the place is filling up. Maybe I'm wrong. She didn't specifically say that, but she said a lot of what I heard in this meeting is not accurate. So maybe I misspoke.
Maybe more appropriate for us to start with the town manager, Libby Gibson, and ask her who she thinks may be the appropriate person.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is hopefully the approval of the minutes of the task force January 14th, 2021 meeting.
Move acceptance.
Is there a second?
Second.
All of the votes have to be by roll call vote. And neither Bob Davis nor Mark Rosen will be voting at this point. They're non-voting members of the task force. So Leon Braithwaite,
Brathwaite, aye.
Mr. Brown,
Aye.
Mr. Cahill,
Bill, aye.
Mr. Chattonover,
Chatting aye.
Mr. Cedarholm,
Cedar on my.
Mr. Suso. You're
He said
on
it, but he's
mute,
muted.
Julian. You're still on mute.
Suso, aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Vercruyze.
Eric Cruzy, aye.
Okay. So going on to number 5, the topics. It sounds like composting is a great way, composting, recycling. Try to find out what the sister island of Nantucket's doing. How long we're doing it. It used to be the islands never met because it was the most impossible place to get to. You'd have to charter one of the steamship authority boats to get there, and it would cost forever except for the football game.
Oh, there's no boat between the islands.
No, so with Zoom, we can do all of this stuff much better. Unless there's another suggestion, I'll go with that for the next meeting.
Sure.
And why don't we leave the dates? We like Thursdays at 4:30. That seems to work for everyone. And I'll try to get a date from the composting and recycling people when it's convenient for them, and then get back to everyone here.
Okay.
Works
Yes,
for me.
John.
You know, it would be great if we could get the Nantucket person on at the same time we get the Martha's Vineyard people.
That's the idea. Yes.
Okay.
And maybe they know each other even. for all
Yeah,
we know.
they might have. That's right.
Okay.
Probably.
Is there anything else that anyone would like? Anyone from the public? Do I have that on? I do, public input. Anyone on the public raising their hand? Mary Longacre is back. I tried to call on her before, but she had disappeared. But maybe we can talk offline. She has hopefully my contact information. So otherwise, motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second,
Second,
Mr. Braithwaite,
Braithwaite, aye.
Mr. Brown,
Brown eye.
Mr. Cahill,
Cahill, aye.
Mr. Chattonover,
No, right. Thanks, everyone.
Mr. Sederholm,
Cedar Home, aye.
Mr. Suso,
So I.
Mr. Vercruz.
For Chrissy, I,
Thank you all.
very thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
Talk to
you.
you all
See you
soon.
soon, Jim.
See you next time. Yeah, see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay.